I've never seen that done before. I couldn't have even imagined how it's going to be done. And think that from here on out, there will be imitators of this game because it works so well. Fromage is a simultaneous worker placement game where all players have access to only one of 4 quadrants of a giant cheese wheel. And simultaneously, they're placing their timed workers into a spot to either collect resources or make cheese. When everyone has made their choices, the wheel rotates, giving players access to a new sector of the wheel. I mentioned these workers being timed. What I mean by that is the more powerful the action is, the longer the worker is going to sit on the cheese wheel before you can retrieve it. The actions have one of 3 levels of strength, and this is indicated by the direction that the worker is facing when it is placed. The big idea is you will know when it's time to retrieve your workers because at the beginning of your turn, you will retrieve every worker who is currently facing you. So what are these actions? Well, in each sector of the board, there are always 2 types of actions, either making cheese or taking resources. Each turn, a player can only make 1 piece of cheese and claim resources 1 time. So in other words, a player is always going to be placing at most 2 workers on their sector of the cheese wheel. Making cheese varies greatly in each sector, so we'll talk about that first. No particular order because the board is modular after all. One action is the festival. In the festival, a worker can be placed in order to claim a tent at the festival, and the objective here is to place cheese adjacent to others in a group because at the end of the game you're going to be scoring points based on the largest group of tents that you have at the festival. The fromagerie gives you both a benefit and in-game scoring. For the in-game scoring, you get different points based on the number of different shelves your workers are placed on, and the bonuses are different ways of getting resources. So the highest tier of reward will give you 2 different resources. The second tier down is going to give you 1 resource, and then the third tier is just going to let you trade 1 resource for another resource. Or on the right side of the fromagerie, there are 3 tiers giving you 3 different points, 3, 2, or 1 point. The city section of the board is all based on area majorities. So you're placing cheese in order to claim a certain region, and at the end of the game, all of the regions are evaluated, and in each one, the player with the majority of cheese or influence gets the points for those regions. Unless there's a tie, in which case the players share a set number of points that differs based on player count. The bistro is quite unique because in the bistro, you're scoring for cheese pairings. What players are trying to do is put 2 pieces of cheese on the same table. If you can accomplish getting 2 pieces of cheese on the same table, then the value of all of those plates increases. So the more cheese pairings you have, the higher the points you'll earn for each plate at the end of the game. The second type of action is taking resources, and there are 4 types of resources, 1 for each sector. The first resource is fruit, and fruit is required in order to claim specialized places on the board for cheese. Based on the icon, you can either move that fruit over to the fruited cheese section or the jam section. And at the end of the game, those 2 sections, fruited cheese and jam, get multiplied together to give you points. The next resource is livestock, and whereas on your turn, you can normally only make 1 piece of cheese in the sector that you're on, livestock enables you to add an extra cheese to the board. It is a free action to make cheese, but in order to pay for it, instead of paying with a worker, you're paying with the livestock resources that you've collected. And the more valuable the cheese is, the more livestock are required. Order cards can be retrieved, and they will give you victory points at the end of the game for making cheese of a specified type. And the way that this works out is just very simple thresholds. The more orders you fulfill, the more points you get. And then finally, structures are resources that you can collect and later pay in order to add a benefit or upgrade to your player board. At the beginning of the game, every player is going to have a different player board with different but balanced structures to give them benefits during the course of the game, but they can only unlock these if they pay. If they pay with the structures that they collect. Then, in the advanced version of the game, you can add in additional structures, which players can draft at the beginning of gameplay so that they can kind of customize their player abilities. I'll also point out that some structures give you a new space where you can place workers. So even though you can normally only place 2 workers on your turn, with structures, sometimes you can place up to 3. Players continue placing workers into each sector and making cheese until one player has made 15 pieces of cheese, at which point the game is immediately over, and at game end, all sectors are scored and players earn points for their fruit and their structures. If any of the structures they've constructed give them victory points, and their completed orders. This is a phenomenal game. It is so well designed. In fact, on my channel, I once posted 18 most popular and influential board games, and one of the challenges in that video is trying to predict the next game that's going to be so groundbreaking, and this has that type of quality in its design. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'm even going to try to tell you why you still might not like it, because I always try to put that in there as well. But gosh, I am a fan of this game. It was hard for me to figure out how to start explaining what I like about this game because everything is just so well integrated, but I'm going to try to break it into 3 parts, beginning with the game is very easy to teach. If a game is very easy to teach, it's important because it means that with any group, it becomes a candidate for taking out. You're not going like, oh, I don't know, I want to play this game, but it takes half an hour to teach it. I don't really know if we have time for that. This one you can teach quickly, so you're going to be playing it more often. And, I mean, you've just heard me explain the rules, but what's cool is when you're actually teaching this game, the components themselves lend themselves to the teach, which is why I give the game such a high score for the components here. These are really phenomenal because everything just makes more sense because the components are so well designed. Everything from the rotating board to the shape of the cheese spaces and what they're pointing in. Once you point out that there are 3 types of worker actions facing in different directions, and the reason they face different directions is because it tells you which worker to pick up. Once the board rotates, you're picking up the worker that faces you. This light goes off and everyone goes, oh, I get it. And then pretty soon people are examining the spaces and they're going, oh, wait, this makes sense because the more valuable the spaces are, the longer the worker's there. They can see it. It stands out. It pops out at them without having to be told. That's the best thing a component could ever do. Number 2 is simultaneous play. Now, I have always been excited about games that are engaging while playing simultaneously because they keep people in the action. But oftentimes, these are either some form of like a roll and write or flip and write style game or a tile placing game. I think it's almost too easy to make a simultaneous action game where people are playing a card or a tile or doing some sort of roll and write. To do a simultaneous worker placement, I've never seen that done before. I couldn't have even imagined how it's going to be done. And I think that from here on out, there will be imitators of this game because it works so well. But I don't think an imitator is ever going to accomplish the intuitive rotation of this cheese wheel. It fits the theme, it fits the function, the rotation, and the sector that becomes available to you as the wheel rotates is excellent for it's extremely conducive to worker placement, and it gives people something that they can easily visualize, and the action keeps the game moving. Number 3 is the game's strategic depth. And this is really important to me because I love games that are thinky. I love problem solving. And if I could, that's all I would ever play. I would always play complex, deeply strategic games. But I can't get away with that because not everyone's always in the mood for games that are as thinky as what I like. And what's cool about this one is that even while this is very thinky, it's still accessible and it's not intimidating. So I can get my wife to play this game. I'm not going to play On Mars with her, which, that would scratch a particular itch for me, but the rule set gets in the way. There are all these things that interfere with my objective, which is how can I get more of my friends into the games that I want to play? This one does that work for me because the game is attractive, it's easy to learn, and once people learn the game, the strategy is apparent to them and they can have fun. They can get into the strategy that I really enjoy. And in that way, I kind of feel like I'm sharing more of what I love about this hobby. But it takes a special kind of game to make strategy accessible. And that's what this game accomplishes. So I like this because it scratches an itch for me without, I don't have to compromise and like play an easier game that I'm not so much in the mood for just to appease more casual gamers. I can invite them into the games that I really love. So that's what I love about the game. I think this is an essential game. I think everyone should own this game because it's so excellent. But I'll tell you what, there are some things that I will caution you about because I imagine not everyone in the entire world is going to love this game. So let me tell you what I would think is the problem with it, even though I have no problem with it. So, number one, the game is 15 pieces of cheese. That is very fast. Normally, I think it's good when a game ends while it's still fun. This one, I think this is the first time I've ever identified a game where I say, no, this game ends too soon. I wish the game was longer. There's a weird conflict there because it doesn't need more strategic depth. I don't need more problem thinking. It's just that 40 minutes and the game's over and you're just going, I was having so much fun. And then you could keep playing over and over again, I suppose. But so often when I want to play a heavy game, I expect the night to take 2.5, 3 hours. And I'm accustomed to that. To accomplish that in 40 minutes, you're just going like, it's over. That was really quick. It's a little too quick. It's not light. I don't think it's a light game. I think it's a really great game with a lot that you can think about, but it's so just, it starts and it ends. And so the only really way that you can work this into your game night is either you're going to keep playing the game over and over again, which I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since I've just played a game over and over again. I haven't played this one over and over again in the same night. Normally what I'll do is I'll just pair it with more games. Like you pair cheese. It's a game pairing night. We're going to play this and we're going to play that. But yes, it has this like, it feels lighter than it is because it's so short. The other thing, I had to work at this in order to put a finger on it, and I think I figured out what it is. There's very little luck in this game, right? The only luck in the game is drawing those order cards, because sometimes you can draw an order card that's very easy for you to produce and plays into your strategy well, and sometimes you can draw an order card that doesn't work out so well. You don't have the opportunity to play that cheese in a way that synergizes with the rest of your strategy. Other than that, there is no other luck. You have the draft. If you're drafting structures at the beginning of the game, well, then maybe you could draw like a better structure than some other one of your opponents, I guess. But that's very minor. Most of this game is pure strategy. You're looking at what your opponents can do, and yet, here's the thing. There are so many configurations because you can change the order of the venues on the change wheel. You can change the order of the resources as well. You can pair each venue with a different resource, and that's going to change the game. While that's happening, you can also change what you're doing with your resource strategy. What structures are you building? Are you going to be emphasizing livestock? How are you using your structures in order to, synergize with your fruit and your livestock? There's a lot going on there. My point is, it feels like there are just absolutely countless ways to approach this game. Now, here's where this could be a bad thing. if you don't see what's going on, if you don't understand how things are related, it almost feels like luck. It almost feels like there are elements in this game that are broken. It, almost, because I played this game and I've had like killer games. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so good at this game. And then I try to do the same thing. That's the mistake. I try to do the same thing and I get wrecked. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what I did this time didn't work at all. And as I was new at the game, I didn't realize it's not because the strategy didn't work because it was a bad strategy. It's because the game had changed. The order was different. The structures were different. The resources were aligned differently. You can't just do the same thing every single time. If you don't realize that, you're going to think that sometimes the game is wacky or out of balance. But if you realize that the setup of the game can seriously influence your strategy, then you can take ownership of it and you can strategize for it. You can actually really get excited about it. If you don't put in that effort, you might just be like, oh, I don't know. I played the game and it was so broken and this guy did one thing, he just totally took off and crushed us. And I think the game is unbalanced. Like, you could do that. Maybe it's just because I am saying I think it takes more work to understand the game, because it's not luck. It's not luck. Um, so those are really only two things I would see that are wrong with it, but I love it. I think it's a fantastic game. Definitely one of my favorites in the last year. And as I reflect on it further, maybe I'll be publishing a best games of all time list or something, and we'll see where it places in that. Fromage. Thanks for watching this video. Bye-bye.